16 crazy toys banned from schools. Teletubby Poe talking doll. This doll derived from the popular Teletubbies show that invaded the American toy market in the late 1990s. Children who watched the show loved their Teletubby Poe, but parents weren't too fond of the dirty things that would come out of its mouth, including the phrase, "bite my butt." It's hilarious that thousands of children were walking, verbally imitating this doll, but unfortunately for the world of comedy, it was taken from store shelves in 1998. Belt buckle Derringertoy gun. Most toy guns don't fire anything, they just at best go through the motions. The thing that made the belt buckle Derringertoy gun so cool was that it fired a cap whenever the wearer pushed their stomach forward, causing a flame to come from the toy. It's easy to see how this was frowned upon by adults. Really, how did the makers think that they could get away with selling this toy in the first place? It was eventually banned, and now is remembered as one of the most dangerous toys ever made. Aqua Dots. A Canadian company based in Toronto launched Aqua Dots in 2007. They consisted of small beads that would stick to each other when moistened with water. Though the concept behind this item was creative and completely harmless, the materials that made them were not. The factory in China where they were manufactured used a chemical that acted as a powerful sedative when swallowed. Parents with rambunctious kids would welcome this effect, until realizing it sent several children into comas. Deuces, Aqua Dots. Snacktime Kid Cabbage Patch Doll. Cabbage Patch Kids have always looked kinda creepy, don't you think? Looking at it is sort of like looking at a Chucky doll. You get that feeling that at any moment, it could come to life and attack you. One Cabbage Patch doll, the Snacktime Kid, couldn't come to life, but it did munch on little plastic snack foods, or children, through a motorized mouth. The toy's jaws turned out to be so powerful that they could rip hair clean out of its roots. Learning institutions, of course, wanted no part of the Snacktime Kid, and eventually the toy was recalled, and customers were offered a $40 refund. Battlestar Galactica Missile Launcher. Created for Battlestar Galactica toys that were made in the late 70s, this missile launcher consisted of red missiles that were a little over an inch long. Their size meant that they could easily become lodged in a kid's throat, and as a result, a recall of the product was quickly issued by its maker, Mattel. Sky Dancers. It's no surprise that toys with flying capabilities are always a hit with kids. Just take a look at drones, which seem to be everywhere today. In 1994, Sky Dancers were released, combining the popularity of a Barbie doll with the magic of flight. The toys were great, except for the fact that the magic fairies had a tendency to randomly take off in any direction, causing several highly publicized injuries and school bans across the country. Eventually, this product of the past was pulled off the market. Candy cigarettes. An increased awareness of the health detriments by smoking cigarettes has caused candy cigarettes to be banned not only in most schools, but in several countries, including Turkey, Finland, Brazil, and Saudi Arabia. Clearly, anything that normalizes the idea of smoking in culture isn't a very good idea. Remarkably, however, the candy toys have yet to be banned in the USA, and are still sold on a small scale across the country. SpongeBob Address Book. It's obvious to see why many of the toys on this list were banned. This SpongeBob Address Book, however, is definitely not one of those toys. What could possibly be distracting or dangerous about this apparently harmless pad of paper? Turns out, the paint on those metal spiral bindings contained an excessive amount of lead, a substance that is very much toxic. Its makers were forced to issue a giant recall in 2007. Clackers. Clackers first came into the public consciousness starting in the late 1960s. By the early 70s, they had become a must-have item for kids. They made an ear-splitting sound when in motion and were highly addictive to play with. Made out of wood or acrylic, the plastic versions had a potential to shatter on impact, essentially becoming shrapnel for anyone close to the explosion. Not only did schools begin to ban the toys in the 70s, but the FDA became involved. They set stringent safety standards for the toy manufacturers, and the Clackers were pulled off the market as a result. Today, science has allowed toy makers to manufacture non-shattering versions of the toy that are available for purchase. Slap bracelets. Invented in the early 80s by a high school shop teacher from Wisconsin, these simple toys were made of a long piece of steel, usually similar to a tape measure, wrapped in fabric. He marketed those under the name slap wraps. The bracelet shape could curve around an unsuspecting person's wrist or ankle, making for a fun prank toy. They also doubled as a fashion statement, a combination that caused the item to become extremely popular amongst kids in the 90s. Unfortunately, there were knockoff versions from Asia that were made of cheaper materials, and those were dangerous. The fabric would wear down, and low-grade steel with sharp edges beneath caused several lacerations. The final straw came when Florida elementary school students earned a big batch of slap bracelets after a fundraiser. They were Chinese knockoffs though, and once the fabric wore down, students found nude pictures printed on the metal underneath. What? Silly bands. Originally invented in Japan in the early 2000s, silly bands blew up in popularity across the world starting in 2010. Worn as bracelets, they are made out of silicone rubber and often form shapes like animals, objects, or phrases. Though they seem totally harmless, many classrooms banned the toys because they would cause students to lose their focus. There were also several incidents where children injured themselves by wrapping them too far up their arms, cutting off blood circulation. Fidget spinners. Marketed as a tool for kids who suffer from concentration issues and learning difficulties, fidget spinners have become a new craze that is sweeping playgrounds and classrooms across the globe. YouTube videos of people doing tricks, like spinning them on top of their fingers or foreheads, garner millions of views. Kids are hooked, and anyone doing neat tricks with a fidget spinner usually attracts a crowd. Some adults, specifically school teachers, however, aren't as thrilled. Remarkably, schools across the UK and the United States are banning the toys, citing them as an annoyance, distraction, and potential danger to students. Garbage Pail Kids. Topps decided to capitalize on the success of Cabbage Patch Kids dolls by making a line of trading cards that parodied the popular toys. The cards would include variations of the dolls performing unsavory and often hilarious acts. Schools apparently didn't appreciate the cards as much as kids, and even some naughty adults, and decided to ban them at the height of their popularity. Their reason? They had become too much of a distraction in the classroom. Sometimes teachers just don't know how to relax. Pogs. Pogs had their heyday in the 90s, when the collector's item exploded in popularity, appearing everywhere from comic book stores to McDonald's Happy Meals. Of course, playing with Pogs is essentially a precursor to gambling, and the act was frowned upon by teachers, administrators, and parents alike. Kids would also get into scuffles over the outcome of Pog battles. As a result, districts throughout North America, Australia, and Europe banned them from schools, an act that would be the beginning of the end of the craze. By the mid-90s, Pog bans were no longer necessary, as they had already completely faded out. Yo-Yos. A toy whose root can be traced as far back as ancient Greece, yo-yos were widely distributed in the 1920s and remain beloved to this day. Every few years, the toy seems to have made a resurgence in popularity, and every few years, most schools have to impose some sort of ban on them because of their obvious potential to injure completely innocent students. Of course, they aren't banned outside of schools and even inspire competitions. The World Yo-Yo Contest is held annually and has been dominated by players from Japan, a country where the game is incredibly popular. Atomic Energy Laboratory. Perhaps one of the most infamous toys ever created, the Gilbert U-238 Atomic Energy Laboratory was sold in the early 50s, with the budding scientist in mind. The problem was that parts of the set contained real-life radioactive materials that were obviously dangerous. Schools issued bans at first, but it wasn't really necessary, as the toy never really caught on, and only sold a few thousand units over the span of a few years. So what's something you learned today that you didn't already know? Let us know down in the comments section below, and while you're there, don't forget to subscribe to see more awesome videos just like this.